because Nagorno-Karabakh is an important issue, but it's also a bit of a mystery because everyone, at least in the English-speaking world, has kind of heard of this conflict. Well, anyone who pays attention anyways. They've heard of it, but they don't really know the background of it. So could you tell us the history and also why is this kind of valley region so important to both Armenia and Azerbaijan?
As we know, the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict between two countries, South Caucasus countries, has its just background, historical background. In 1920s, when Azerbaijan and Armenia were independent from the Russian Empire, the ethnic conflict began between them. As well as most of the countries were independent, they began territorial claims between themselves. And of course, the main point of disputes, main subject of dispute between two countries was Karabakh. But after collapse of two South Caucasus republics and after joining them to the Soviet Socialist republics, the conflict was solved by the authority in Moscow. Then they shared some territories, Zangezur, Sunik, and Karabakh between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And in 1924, the Soviet authority gave the autonomous status to the Nagorno-Karabakh. They mainly lived Armenian population in Nagorno-Karabakh, but in surrounding regions, districts were Azerbaijani population. And in the 1988, when began collapse of the Soviet Union, the Armenians living in Nagorno-Karabakh, they began demonstrations, and their main demands were just separation from Azerbaijan and became independent or joining to Armenia. And then, of course, began conflict, armed phase of the conflict, and till 1994, the armed conflict between two ethnic groups, also between Azerbaijan and Armenia, began in Azerbaijan territory in Nagorno-Karabakh. Of course, were displaced thousands of population from Armenia. Azerbaijan is displaced from Armenia to Azerbaijan, and Armenians from Azerbaijan to Armenia. But the people living in Nagorno-Karabakh, Armenians, they stayed there. But after occupation of Karabakh by Armenian armed forces, the Azerbaijanis from several districts surrounding Nagorno-Karabakh, they forced to just leave their places, their homes, and as refugees to move to other districts of Azerbaijan.
Now, here's an important aspect to this. You mentioned that when the South Caucasus republics joined the Soviet Union, that they kind of maybe drew the map of the region of Nagorno-Karabakh in not the best way. If you remember, at the start of the special operation, President Putin actually blamed the communists of the 1920s for artificially creating Ukraine. So is this another example of the Soviets? Did they do a bad job with the way the maps and borders were? Were they unrealistic? Or do you think that their policies of this semi-independent Nagorno-Karabakh did work? So how do you feel about the maps that they made?
I think it was just justified position from the Russian authorities and from the USSR, because they was conflict, and so to make just maps, I think in such kind maps, of course, were more optimal and were just justified position by Moscow, because if they gave the territories to Armenia, of course, Azerbaijan, it was unjustified. For example, a position in attitude to Azerbaijan or to Azerbaijan, Armenia makes demands. That's why I think it was justified position by Moscow and by the USSR. Yes, of course. But after ceasefire in 1994 between Armenia and Azerbaijan, after signing Bishkek protocols, it's called so, ceasefire between two countries. Of course, 2 decades between Azerbaijan and Armenia were just peace. We can just see it so. But in 2020, they began a new phase of armed conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia. So Azerbaijan liberated 7 districts surrounding Nagorno-Karabakh. But mainly, there was no civil population. They were Azerbaijanis, but they were displaced from surrounding districts. But in Khankendi, in Stepanakert, the Armenian calls it Stepanakert, Azerbaijan, Khankendi, the same city, capital of former Nagorno-Karabakh. Of course, Azerbaijan just liberated its territories, and in 10th November in 2020, there was signed declaration between a Russian president, among the president of Russian Federation, Azerbaijan, Republic of Azerbaijan, and Armenia, Vladimir Putin, Ilham Aliyev, and Nikol Pashinyan.
Now, one important moment. So in 1994, the Armenians went in and sort of, took control of it.
Yeah.
Then everything's fine for 20 years, and then all of a sudden, fighting erupts again. Do you know why, after 20 years, did this start? Why did that happen?
Oh, of course, very good moment, because Minsk Group of the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, Minsk Group, that co-chairs the United States of America, France, and the Russian Federation. They just be busy with negotiations. They tried to conciliation between Azerbaijan and Armenia, yes, make conciliation, and they were just busy with negotiations between two countries. It last over 2 decades, but there were no results. Of course, there were some plans, but no results. That's why they began new phase of armed conflict, and Azerbaijan just liberated 7 surrounding regions. But the former, in the past, they lived Azerbaijan people, but the people that live in Stepanakert, Khankendi, the Armenian civil population stayed there. Just they stay there and live there. Now Azerbaijan is ready to give them equal rights as other citizens of the country. The president of Azerbaijan declared that they are also our citizens. We are ready to give them all equal rights as our citizens.
Basically, the people who are living in Nagorno-Karabakh, did they have a problem with their citizenship? Was it unclear what country they belonged to? Was that it?
Oh, I think they are now the citizens of Armenia, or they have Armenian passports, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. I'm not sure of it, of course, but as I know, they have Armenian citizenship. Yeah. Just where Armenia, they contact with other. Word as a part. Yes.
And one thing that's was interesting, and something that Russians are very proud of, was the fact that with this conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, that they turned to Russia to kind of make the negotiations and sign the deal. So for Russian people, this was a really good moment of sort of pride and optimism that Russia is important again, and that we can get along with our neighbors. So why did they turn to Russia? Why not to like the UN or France, Germany, or the United States? Why did they seek Russia to be this big deal maker?
Of course, thanks to efforts of Russia, thanks to peaceful efforts of Russia, especially Russian President Vladimir Putin, the peace and stability came to the region, really, because without efforts of Russia, it was impossible. As we can just guess that 3 co-chairs of OSCE Minsk group, they have conflict between themselves. For example, Russia, France, and US. So in other places of the world, in conflict areas, they have no just agreement between themselves. That's why it, because of it, due to this, of course, Armenia and Azerbaijan also has no peace between themselves over 20 years, more than 20 years. But then Russia took the initiative to its hands and forced, maybe not forced, but they agreed to two sides to sit down before the negotiations table and to sign the agreement. But now that happens in the region, of course, that's a great pity, because armed collision between the sides began again. And 2 days ago, of course, I have heard about it in Moscow, that they began again armed phase of conflict, of course. But Russia tried to solve the conflict and to that borders between two delineation and demarcation process between two countries. According to Russian plan, I guess it must be on the Soviet maps, just when the two countries' borders were, of course, delimited and demarcated by the Soviet USSR. And I think it's the best way solution of a conflict, settlement of the conflict, because both sides were just agreed with this plan. 70 years we lived in these conditions, under these conditions. But now...
But one problem is that, from what I remember, the borders in my mind, isn't Nagorno-Karabakh, isn't it kind of like a little island away from Armenia? Wasn't that part of the problem? It doesn't touch Armenia? Is that why they can't agree to the borders?
Azerbaijan gave Lachin corridor, we call it so. Yes, that Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia can conduct between themselves. There's communication. Azerbaijan, according to the November agreement, Azerbaijan gives the opportunity to Armenia and Armenian population to contact between themselves, Lachin corridor, and they have communication between themselves. No one just disturbs them, and yes, that's why, of course, Azerbaijan government will try, so promised to make investigations to the region where live Armenian population, and to just improve their living conditions and to help them to integrate to other part of Azerbaijan. Yes, we are ready to give them all of opportunities, of course. But that's a pity that conflict began again. Maybe there are some moments that the sides are not agree. As you know, in Armenia also, demonstrations against this settlement plan. And Pashinyan government also, of course, gain it.
The Pashinyan government seems to be in a lot of trouble.
Yes,
having a lot of problems.
Of course, there's just a strong opposition against Pashinyan, and they try to force him just to eliminate maybe this just agreement, or not to carry out the implementation of its articles.
Well, exactly. The Moscow media, like, the TV and channels and stuff, right, in Moscow, sort of paint the picture that they're putting pressure on Pashinyan to go to war because it causes problems again for Russia. It creates a big war at Russia's borders that Russia might have to pick a side on when Russia kind of doesn't, I think, really want to pick a side in this conflict. So do you think that there's any truth to that outside forces are trying to force this conflict to start up again?
Of course, but we know that two other co-chairs of the Minsk group, the US and France, they are not going to accept the Russian peace plan in the region, in the South Caucasus. They are not going to accept that Russia, without the agreement, just sent its troops to as peacemakers to the region. And for 5 years, of course, they have to stay in the region and to control the stability in the region. And I think as Russia is just now is busy in special military operation in Ukraine, of course, the conflict between co-chairs of the Minsk group, we can see its results now because they are not accepting the Russian unilateral just plan that Russia sent its troops to the region. That's why maybe to make attention Russia to other regions.
Russia's too busy to sort of be there.
Of course, the Ukrainian side officially they declared that we want that Russia was busy with other conflicts in some different places in the world. That, for example, in Taiwan, in Kosovo, in Karabakh, we observed the same situation.
Now, I have one thing to ask. Before we had this interview, you were telling me that there's actually a pretty large pro-Russian group within Azerbaijan, normal people, which I found surprising because if you read anything about Azerbaijan in English, they always paint the picture, one of my favorite expressions, they paint the picture that Azerbaijan is essentially already basically a part of Turkey. It's completely controlled by Erdogan, and that Russia's lost it, and that the people there are very much moved towards their Turkic Islamic heritage and want nothing to do with Russia. But you told me kind of the opposite. So what are the masses, the normal people in Azerbaijan, what are their political views?
Very interesting questions. Thank you. So, of course, Russian influence in the region after collapse of the Soviet Union limited, is not so large scale as in the period of USSR existence. As you are very right that, of course, influence of Azerbaijan, Turkey, West, Iran, Israel, the United States, and other countries, England, and other countries, as well as over the Armenia, of course, the same. Armenia also has just the groups that Iran, controlled by Iran, by the United States of America. France influence is also very just strong over the Armenia. And of course, pro-Russian groups also, but it's not so strong and so not so powerful as we imagine, especially. Of course, both sides, not officially, but population, opposition, and other groups, they blame Russia in everything that Russia. We have understand that Russia is not. Now doesn't have just influence, large-scale influence over the sides, over the countries. And so the groups, really pro-Russian groups, both in Armenia and Azerbaijan, pro-Russian groups, pro-Western groups, but also in over Azerbaijan, pro-Turkey groups, pro-Israeli and pro-Iranian and other groups also, of course.
Well, I think it's kind of surprising about having pro-Israeli groups, especially
really?
as a Muslim country. So what do they? What do
paradox,
they see?
So.
Well, what do they see? What benefit does Israel provide to Azerbaijan potentially? What could they do?
Of course, Israel tries to surround Iran from its north borders, Azerbaijan is a very strategic country because of these point of views. Also, Israel helped Azerbaijan, but not helped, but sold some kind of arms to Azerbaijan army. And thanks to this kind of arms, Azerbaijan won war. Of course, that's why they say all time try to by press and by media to the opinion of people that Israel is Azerbaijan friend. It's our friend country. It's just we are friends. We have good relationship from the ancient times. The Jewish population, they lived in Azerbaijan. We have good just relations with Jewish, and so they try to make us friends.
Now, one thing I'm kind of curious about, you mentioned that the Azerbaijani language is so similar to Turkish that you just have your telephone is set to Turkish
Exactly.
because you don't need to think about it.
Exactly.
Which sort of opens the question, like what kind of media do you get? Like on your television, are you getting then Russian TV, Turkish TV shows in their native language? What does the media look like in Azerbaijan?
That's a picture that media is not independent. Of course, it's under pressure maybe or under influence of some foreign forces, countries, powers, even.
It seems like they always are, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so in all the world, of course. But in Azerbaijan, we can observe the same in Armenia, of course, in Georgia, in other post-Soviet countries, and all the time, they blame Russia in all tragedies. Of course, it's not justified, justful attitude. I don't accept it. But it's politics so that to blame in all tragedies Russia, and we as a press, they want to just speculation and manipulation of minds of the people. Yes.
So basically, it's sort of like if the economy isn't very good, things aren't getting done, it's all because of this legacy of being with Russia? Or do they mean that there are like Russian spies in the country who are trying to take it over? Well, is it the history, or is it like what Russia's doing right now? That's good.
Yeah, of course, as well as we just more than 200 is for the just with Russia together, the same states, the same empire, parts of the Soviet Union, and of course just some kind of people, just maybe most of people think so that they blame Russia, but. Of course, as I explained, it's not so because Russia is not so powerful, and Russia doesn't control over Azerbaijan. Yes, full scale. We can speak about full scale Russian control over not on Azerbaijan, also on Armenia and other post-Soviet socialist countries. That's why I think to blame Russia it is not, it's unjust.
Not very fair. Well, then I guess my last question for you is where do you think the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh is going? Because on our planet, there are many frozen conflicts, like between North and South Korea, between Cyprus and North Cyprus, even to an extent between Ireland and the United Kingdom. That conflict froze but was never really resolved. So do you think that the problems of Nagorno-Karabakh are going to carry on for generation after generation, or is there some sort of solution?
Yeah, I think the best solution to just implement the articles of the agreement that was signed in 2 years ago, and then to begin as soon as possible a delimitation and demarcation process between two countries, because it's very important. And after that, both Armenia and Azerbaijan must integrate to the European Eurasian structures under leadership of Russia, Eurasian Economic Organization, and other organization structures that we have to integrate. And then they will no problem between Armenia and Azerbaijan. They will just
So if essentially they joined the Eurasian Economic Union,
Yes.
much in the same way the problem between Ireland and the United Kingdom faded away when they were sort of both in the European
Yeah.
Union at the same time. There was less to fight over. Okay, I see that.
But I think for then Russia will have just opportunity to keep stability and security. And otherwise, it's impossible, and all these conflicts, armed phases of conflicts, will last on, and from the both sides will just die young people, and it's very really just great picture.
So anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this video and you like the opinions coming out of my big fat mouth, then join up on my Telegram channel. That's Tim Kirby Hardcore on Telegram. Link, of course, in the description.